Hello and welcome to Tech Career Japan. I'm Aki. I'm project leader of global recruiting project at Shift. And here I'm with Chad, CEO of Wahl+Case. So thank you, Chad, for joining us today.
No, thank you.
And before we get started, can you explain about yourself and Wahl+Case services?
Yeah, so Wahl+Case is a technology recruitment company, as you said. We work on a lot of the engineering and sales and marketing positions for our clients, which are both Gaishike and Japanese companies. I got into recruitment myself in 2010 in Tokyo and joined Wahl+Case in 2017.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time again today. So we have a lot of questions.
Yeah, I'm going to do my best to answer them.
So can you give us a brief overview of what project managers does, and particularly in the Japanese context?
Yeah, so I'm happy to. I think project manager is going to run either kind of like one larger project or potentially several other projects. They can be internally focused for the company they work for, or sometimes they're working on the client side, right? Without getting too complicated, we can we can kind of dig into this a little bit later, but we can kind of broadly say that there's like technical and non-technical project managers. And then typically technical project managers will handle projects related to the software development lifecycle, might require a little bit more hands-on coding, while non-technical project managers are sometimes working on like the business side of a project, such as it could be like budgeting and managing the project or working with stakeholders, or it could be like not related to hardware at all. It could be like an office move, for example.
Wow, sounds difficult.
I think so, yeah. I've only tried to run a couple of projects myself, and it's always way harder than I expect.
Okay, so what's the key responsibilities for project managers in Japan, do you think?
So, I mean, you have to manage your resources, and you have to deliver the project in time, and usually like under budget as well, right? Or on budget, And so the resources that you get as a project manager can be varied across the business based on what project you're running. It's usually not the case that you have like a dedicated team. It's more like this person from finance is gonna help, and this person from, engineering is gonna help, and I need this administrator, and everyone comes together to deliver whatever that project is, right? Like you can imagine, I gave the example of an office move. You can imagine that for an office move, there's going to be lots of different stakeholders that you have to communicate with in order to make that project a success.
Okay, thank you very much. So what skills are essential for project managers in Japan?
Yeah, probably a lot of the skills that I don't have. That's why I wouldn't be very good at this job. But I think you have to be like a really meticulous organizer and planner. Like you have to be able to, I think, visualize the whole project and to create those like milestones so that you know exactly how to prioritize what you're doing. I think running projects is super hard, especially when people have other jobs that they're doing as well, right? So if you're participating in a project, I'm the project manager, and I'm asking you to dedicate a certain amount of time, you also have all the other things that you're supposed to be doing that might be unrelated to the project itself. And so your priorities might be different than my priorities. And so I think that's one of the challenging things that you have to deal with as a PM, is how to manage those resources and communicate really clearly with the stakeholders. Yeah, I think those are probably the big ones.
Okay, get it. Are there any specific qualification or certification that are actually valued in Japan for the project managers?
There's a few. I think the ones that I come across the most are Prince 2 and PMP, which is Project Management Professional. I see those a lot. I also see CSM, Certified Scrum Master, for like the development projects, or maybe like a Prince 2 Agile Foundation. Those are ones that if you have those on your resume, it can make a difference in the interview process for sure.
I see. Okay, So I'm just curious, like, how can someone start like project manager career, like, even they are not, project managers yet?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I don't think there's one right way. I mean, I guess some of the, like a lot of the, I've talked to so many project managers over the years, and most of them don't set out their career thinking, I'm going to be a project manager. It's more like they start to develop a really strong skill set towards project management, or they realize that they enjoy it, or they have a talent for it, or the organization does, right? And says like, hey, you're really good at this. Like, we want you to run this project, and then we want you to, and it just kind of happens to where that person gradually takes on more and more responsibility for projects. And so you could come from any background. Like if you were a developer and people realize that you had a talent for doing this, and gradually you're taking more and more responsibility until one day you're, a software PM, right? And then you're running projects yourself. And I think that that's how a lot of people get into it. And then at some point, maybe they think like, okay, well, I'm going to get my, PMP certification because it seems like an attractive career path for them. And so I think like it's not always like a direct transition. It's not like a promotion. It's like one day you're a developer and the next day you're a project manager, maybe by title, but it's actually a much longer process than that.
I see. Interesting. Like you already kind of mentioned about, but like, what's the potential career growth like for project managers in Japan?
Yeah, so I mean, there's always a need for project managers because it's such a tough job. I think bringing people in, to a project and then getting it done by deadline, it's a pretty in-demand skill set, which creates a lot of like career opportunities for people, right? So on the technical PM side especially, there's always more job openings than there are suitable candidates to fill them. In terms of career, I think that larger organizations that are having like many, many different projects on at the same time, you could actually go like take on more projects at once. And so there's also another job called a program manager, where you're actually overseeing multiple like interconnected projects. So you might have multiple project managers that are reporting to you, and you're managing the whole thing, right? Also, some project managers develop a really specialist skill set. And they have a very specific type of project that they run, and they can actually work on very high value contracts all over the world. So, for example, when I first got into recruitment, this is a long time ago, I was working with an asset management company here in Tokyo. They were implementing a asset management system that was very, very specific. And there was only a few people outside of the company that made that software system that actually knew how to implement it and could run that project from end to end. And so the company was asking me to find that person, and I found one who was in Switzerland, making a lot of money on like 1 to 2 year contracts, and they weren't staying, like they were going to the U.S., to Europe. They had options in Japan. So it's, if you're interested in that, like you can be kind of a hired gun that goes around and does special projects, often at really good salaries.
Wow. Interesting. Wow. Like, I'm also curious, like
Yeah.
what's the typical like salary range for project managers in Japan?
So that's a tough question to answer because it really depends on where you're working, what your experience is, also like the types of projects that you're working on. Like I mentioned that the project a minute ago, there's like 5 people in Japan that can do it. And so the salaries are pretty high, right? I think on average, you're probably looking, this is a pretty wide range, but it's probably between 8 to 15 million Japanese yen. But it can be more. Like if you have a really highly technical skill set, then I think you could go up like 15, 20, or even over 25 in some cases.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a tough job, so people pay a lot for it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I hope I can be project manager someday.
Well, yeah. I mean, we can try to find you a job, Aki, but I think both of our bosses are going to be upset if we do that. So
Right. Yeah. I shouldn't say that. Okay.
you can find a project management job in Shift.
Yeah. Maybe.
But actually, like, I mean, I'm curious as well. Like, we're talking a lot. You're asking me a lot of questions about project managers, but I mean, can you tell me about like a day in the life of a project manager at Shift? Because it's a little bit different, like doing internal projects versus maybe external projects with customers.
Right. So you mean the project manager in
Yeah, like the
like
people that you hire at Shift, because you hire a lot of PMs, right? You're hiring project managers now. Like, is there a typical type of skill set or like a type of project that they're working on?
okay. Thank you for asking. So for Shift, like since we are doing, like IT consulting, like DX promotion, and based on software quality assurance, so people has to know about the like developing life cycle at first. So the candidate must know about the like developing. So they has to be like engineers and engineer skills and know about software, like developing life cycle, and like have experience of like client facing. And yeah, that's the minimum requirement for them. And other than that, like, we have a lot of client like and in like a lot of different like industry, like from finance, like logistics, and like net services, like and so on. So like if the candidate has like specific knowledge about its industry, like we're gonna hire them for that department, which has like those client in like specific industry. And what else was yeah, those are the like candidate we are hiring.
Yeah.
And yeah, like half of our project are based on like quality assurance. So like under the project manager, like they're like test designer, like project leader and test engineers. So the shift PM, I would say shift PM, like who is doing like software quality assurance project. So they tend to have like a lot of people under them. So I would say like shift PM like would be required like more like people management skills like than
Right.
other project manager in other companies. Yeah, and yeah, and since the client like whom they're gonna facing are engineers, so that's why shift PM their background has to be coming from like engineering background.
Right.
So I think that's the difference.
Yeah, because you're more looking for those technical PMs. And I think the challenge of that job is not just managing the internal project, but you're also working directly with the customer, right? And so then the level of expectations can sometimes be pretty high. Not to say that if you're an internal PM, it's not, but the level of anger is different when you're dealing with a paying customer versus like an internal stakeholder that is, unhappy about something, right? So yeah, I think that's tough. But thanks for the explanation.
Yeah, it is. It is tough. Okay. Yeah, thank you for asking me the question too. And okay, so other question is like, so how do benefit and perks for project managers in Japan like compared to like outside of Japan? I mean other countries.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to qualify my answer a little bit. I mean, almost all of my recruitment experience is here in Japan, right? I've done a little bit in the US and California, but most of it's here. However, my understanding from working, because I've worked with PMs that come from all different parts of the world, right? And I think here there's a lot more permanent opportunities. Permanent opportunities. Sorry, my voice is a little bit is going today, but the as opposed to other countries where project managers are probably more on a contract basis, right? Contract is not like is viewed differently in Japan and outside of Japan anyway, but I think most companies are a little bit less hesitant, are a little bit more hesitant to hire somebody as what we would call seishain or permanent employment here in Japan, where they're more likely to find a job as permanent and work on a lot of different variety of projects for the same company, as opposed to if you're in in Europe or the US, you might have like a year with a company, you finish the project and you move on, right? So I think that's probably like some people would view that as a benefit, some people would not. I know I've talked to like project managers from the US who are like, I like my ability to move around a bit more. But I think here in Japan, people want a little bit more stability in their work life as well.
So what are the different types of project managers in Japan, and how do their roles differ?
Yeah, so I mentioned a little bit earlier about we have like the non-technical PMs and then the kind of technical PMs, right? So just as an example, it's exactly what you said. So a technical PM, like running a QA project, they're working closely with the customer, they're overseeing a kind of like QA or a team of people, and they might be more like dedicated resources, at least for that project, right? And because of that, like that PM, again, as you pointed out, has to have a really strong technical skill set because they have to understand in detail what's happening at each stage of the project and what the likely like technical barriers or challenges will be throughout that project. A non-technical PM might be doing, like I give the example of an office move, and I call that non-technical, but actually there's going to be technical components in that, but they're different because they're like infrastructure related. It's like if you're going to do an office move, you have to set up Wi-Fi, you have to make sure that everybody's, that everything works. And so in that situation, you're going to be working with all the different teams to arrange the office move, and Shift just moved into a beautiful, wonderful new office. But I can only imagine how difficult that project was because you have so many different people to please, right? And then you have to have everything that works, right? It has to work as intended on the day that is planned. You got this deadline, right? And so even non-technical PMs will often have to work with technical people, and they usually have an understanding of technical problems, but they might not be themselves able to solve those problems. Whereas a technical PM, if something breaks down in the process, usually they can dig in and figure it out themselves and then, make a plan to solve it.
So for yeah, like you mentioned, and I'm also curious about the trend. Like, are there any like industry or like IT areas, I mean, like specific industry or like IT system, like project management roles, like that are like very high demand in Japan?
Yeah, for sure. I think if you're a software or technical PM, there are plenty of jobs. I think if you have experience managing the full development lifecycle, it kind of doesn't matter what industry. You're gonna like you can jump between industries. So as you pointed out at Shift, you may be like, okay, you see somebody that has like a financial services background. Of course, they might be well suited to that, and Shift has a big business, so you can offer those kind of like verticals, right? But for a lot of what we're seeing is like if a software PM or technical PM is moving between companies, it actually doesn't matter as much what industry they're coming from. It's more about their experience to manage the whole software development lifecycle. And then they can, if they are interested in trying a different industry, they're able to do that. So I think that's probably the most in demand. I will say this is a little bit from our perspective, and our clients are not, for example, we don't work with many super large banks, right? And so when I first got into recruitment at one of my biggest clients was an American. I don't think I'm not going to say it. I was going to say it, and then I'm like, maybe I shouldn't. I don't know. It was Citigroup. That's my only. I'm going to break the fourth wall to tell the camera it was Citigroup. See if they leave that in the edit. But like, they were my biggest client in the early days, and actually I worked with their PMO, which is Project Management Office. They hired a lot of project managers, but they hired a lot of like more generalists. They needed some technical people, and they needed people that could oversee some of the technical, like the development lifecycle. But what I've experienced since then is like that's a little bit less of a desired skill set. But again, the last 6 years I've been here, and here we're more on the technical side, so we see a lot more requirements for technical PMs as well.
Interesting. Like, how about language skill? Like, how important is the Japanese language skill for project managers in Japan?
Very, yeah. I mean, I would love it if I had a different answer for you, but like it's pretty much required because, like, if you're operating on the customer side, you have to be able to communicate with the customer. You have to be able to take all the requirements, understand what the stakeholders need, so that you can deliver the right result, right? And the margin for budget on a successful project is usually pretty narrow, I think. And so there's not like budget for language support. You're not going to be able to get a translator to come in. And that's it's a barrier to getting the job done anyway, right? So really our experience is that customers are looking for Japanese speaking, ideally like bilingual project managers that can directly work with the customer and understand at a deep level and solve their problems. Again, for some internal projects, yeah, like maybe you don't need as much Japanese, but you still have to be able to communicate to all the different stakeholders internally. So if the main language in the office is English, then perhaps, but to be honest, for us, those positions are super rare. Again, back when I was working with that place that I said before, they would hire people that didn't speak Japanese. But that actually like slowed way down over the last few years, I think.
Okay, so is it kind of difficult to for like non-Japanese project managers, like finding project manager roles in Japan?
If you don't speak Japanese, yes. Yeah, and usually when we say speak Japanese, like there's a difference between I can talk to you at a bar versus like the level of expectation. When people say business level Japanese, they mean like keigo. And that is sometimes even like what we say business level Japanese or like N2 level, like JLPT2 level Japanese. Often those people will still struggle in the client side communication or the customer communication because the expectations are so high. And again, the position itself is so important that the fluidity of the discussion, how easy it is to talk and understand each other is so important to the way that things get done. So yeah, I think unfortunately it's pretty tough.
Mm-hmm. I see. Okay. Like beside like language, like what are some like common challenges that project managers facing?
So, I mean, delivering a project on time and on budget are both huge challenges. And recently we went through our own kind of big project because we changed our CRM, right? And we experience, like, as non-technical people ourselves, from our side, from like the stakeholder side, right? We experience what it's like when there's a lot of unknowns going into a project. And so we learned a lot from that experience. I can say that. I think you have to scope out the project so well. You have to understand every potential challenge, ideally before you get to it. By the time you know it's a challenge, it may be too late. But I think inevitably those things happen, right? You'll run into those things where something nasty jumps out of the closet and you just have to deal with it. And again, you have the budget and the finish line is like looming over you. So I think those are like the biggest challenges that people have, and how they deal with that, keeping a cool head. And even when it's the customer's fault, you can maybe say it's like, well, it's your fault, but you have to be super polite about how you do it and say like, hey, we didn't know about this monster you had hiding in the closet, so like, how could we have planned for that? But I think those things are tough, right? Because even when you scope the project really well, if your customer is not necessarily easy to deal with, or they don't know. So in our example, like where we were changing our CRM, we didn't know. So they asked us questions, but we didn't know enough to be like, to tell them, right? And so I think there's some of that goes both ways, and those are pretty big challenges. But I mean, you must, I don't know, like being on the recruitment side, you may not have as much exposure to this, but you must hear a lot at Shift about some of the challenges. I don't want you to throw any customers under the bus or anything, but I mean, what do you see as being the challenges of the job? Like, what do you hear?
Yeah, like I'm not gonna say like.
Yeah, don't do what I did.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say it, but yeah, like as you mentioned, like deliver on like time and in budget thing is always the not, I wouldn't say problem, like always the like challenges they are facing, like, and yeah, not only our company, like including other company. Like I heard, like I don't know how to say in English, but I had a, like a lot of project or like going crazy because of like they can't deliver on time, like like exceed the budget or something like that.
So I know. So this is like 10 years ago, something like that. But I remember there was an insurance company, and they hired a vendor to run a very important software project for them. I can't say too much because otherwise people know what I'm talking about. Even though it was 10 years ago, there's probably not that many people around that would still remember this story. But the country head, so actually the project went really bad. It didn't work. And the software that they ended up with was like horribly broken. It wasn't what they wanted at all. And of course, like the client, the customer, sort of rejected it was a big thing, obviously. They had a big problem. I don't know if you can reject it or like, but they were just like, this isn't what we wanted. But the country manager or CEO of Japan for the customer resigned because they had dumped all this money into it that they, you can't, it's no refund on that. It's not like you can take the receipt back to the store on like 2 years worth of development work, right? But that person actually kind of lost their job because the vendor that they selected couldn't deliver what they said, or the management between the two businesses wasn't good. So when you talk about, you've heard about messy things, it can get pretty messy. So that's why, like, going through the process, I'm sure when they're evaluating a company like Shift and they're also evaluating several other companies, it's not always just like the cheapest, but it's like how, who has the best resources, who can deliver, the best product at the end, right? And one of the things, the reason I say it was like 10 or 12 years ago, it was after the Lehman shock and the financial shock of 2008. And so like even in like 2012, 2013, customers were still very like cost conscious. And so that was like one of the decisions I think that had backfired, and why the CEO or whatever ended up resigning, because I think they'd gone with like a cost-effective option rather than the best option. That also plays back into why project managers are so important, because the relationship between you and the customer for that project to be successful has to be really, really good.
Right. Yeah, thank you for explaining your 10 years ago
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, thanks for making me feel old as well, Aki.
Okay, so we talked about like challenges,
Yeah.
and let's talk about the the opportunities
Yeah.
as a last question. So what do you see the project managers opportunities or chance like in Japan? Including like future. Like what do you see their chance or opportunities as a project managers in Japan, like especially in like IT industry?
That's huge. So, software is getting more complex, and if we look at where the market is going, AI is kind of this wonderland of what is it going to be and how amazing is it going to be, but it's going to be, no matter what, it's going to be implemented, and it's going to be tough to implement, and companies are going to want to be very careful about how it gets implemented. And what we can see now is most companies are not, there's a few companies trying to develop their own products, but most of that's going to be outside, right? Most of that's going to come from, like companies like Shift or other businesses that are actually implementing systems and software for companies. So whether it's software, whether it's AI or whatever, there's just not enough people that can do this, right? And that's where there's just a huge opportunity for people that might be thinking about developing a career in project management. If they're a hands-on QA person now, or a QA manager or a developer, and they're thinking like, okay, what's my next step? Like there's a huge opportunity there, right? And again, for those people that speak Japanese, you'll have opportunities for sure.
Nice. Okay, I think that's all the question we have. So thank you very much.
Yeah, it was fun. I had a good time speaking with you. My voice held up, so we made it to the end. And I only cracked in that one time. It sounded really bad.
It's okay. Yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks.